Welcome back to my analysis channel. Please subscribe and share this video. Try and get the information out there. It really does help. This is an analysis video looking at Iceland versus France. I'm going to look at how France broke down modern 4-4-2, how they implemented a variety of tactics, and I'm going to draw on comparisons between France and England to see the differences in approaches that the two teams took. So, I did my analysis of England versus Iceland. I made an argument that England had too much possession and they needed to give Iceland more. So you can see here that England is stopping Iceland from playing out from the back. Iceland don't mind going long. It's pretty much part of their approach in any case. But I'm going to make a case again and show how France took a different line. It's part of France's approach to have a bit more balance, to have a lot of the possession but also allow Iceland possession so that they could give them opportunities to make mistakes. If I quickly look at the statistics, I'll show the possession. England had 63% versus 37% possession, 17 efforts on goal versus 8, but in terms of quality of chances, England's quality of chances weren't great. When we look at France, they only had 59 possession, and that was about 57% the first half of the match. So as the footage plays on, you can see here France have got little ambition to stop Iceland having the ball. Iceland aren't going to do a great deal with it. You can see the framework with which Iceland implement the two attacking central midfielders sort of going into a more 4-3-3 are there to anticipate the long balls, but you can see Iceland are not going to penetrate between the lines, and I'm going to show countless examples here of how when Iceland had the ball, France allowed it to happen, were patient and capitalised on mistakes, putting them in counter-attacking situations or a transitional situation on a more frequent basis. But what it also did was allowed them to create panic at times within Iceland in their own half and force them to go long. And I'm going to show the goal really stems from this. And as a result of being stretched like here, this clearance and one or two others, it now means that France can consolidate possession freely, getting their better players. England struggled to get their central midfielders on the ball. They struggled to circulate the ball in central areas and got forced out like they were dictated to by Iceland. And you can see here, Iceland will give the ball away comfortably on a regular basis. They've got mistakes in them. You need to give them the opportunity to make those mistakes. And this is an example I'm talking about here. Long balls like this mean that it's a lot harder now for Iceland to get into that very compact 4-4-2 that they do, and it's now almost impossible for them to stop them getting their central midfielders on the ball. You see, there's no pressure applied on this ball at the moment in time. They've got a reasonably high line as well here, Iceland, which was a feature of their play throughout the tournament. If you play a high line when there's no pressure on the ball here, you're going to subsequently offer the opportunity of a ball in behind. But France are clever here. I'll show countless examples a little bit later of France with this to show that it's a common theme and very much part of their strategy. They created overloads in the half space areas. You can see here that there's two players here that I'm highlighting in the half spaces. They are looking to draw players in. They're looking to disconnect that midfield four from its desired shape. And they'll also use Giroud as well to help create that overload. So they'll move the opposition players within that locality. So if you see here, there's two players within the half space, drawing two players towards the ball. They've got the centre-back getting drawn in here. They've got a high line. There's no pressure on the ball, and it allows for that ball in over the top, and France subsequently score from the opportunity that they've created. Again, Iceland get themselves in a little bit of a mess because they're caught in possession. And you can see there's no compact 3 or 4 lines to break through now. They're in a good counter-attacking situation here, France. And so that's what I think you need to take from this. For the last 10 years, people have been trying to emulate Barcelona's model, Bayern Munich's model, and that's all well and good when you have world-class players and world-class tactics. But for everybody else, there needs to be a little bit more of a medium, and sometimes not having the ball is as powerful a tool as having the ball, and that's where football's shifting towards. In terms of Iceland's tactics, I can cover this really quickly because it is about as simple as football can get. It really is trying to get a crowded area for that direct ball for 3 or 4 players to work off in close proximity and to utilise set pieces. Now, England would criticise massively, rightly so. You can see them scoring here, but even France, even when you know what the opposition is going to do, it's incredibly difficult to defend against a weapon of this nature. and that was really the main threat which Iceland presented. So how did France go about breaking Iceland down? Well, they exploited and created overloads within half-space areas and tried to disconnect Iceland's back line and their midfield line in a variety of ways. And the front two, in fact, they tried to disconnect all three lines. So as I'm showing that they're circulating the ball here, you can see that they're drawing players in from the half-space on this side. So the horizontal circulation is just to try and get players moving across, allow them to get settled. But because they're overloading the half-space area in here, the striker is having to work almost twice as hard as here to try and block off the access to 2 or 3 players. So now when they move the ball across here, the 2 strikers, as you can see as I'm showing here, are now starting to get detached from each other. The midfield's not working too hard at this stage, but when the strikers are then suddenly now disconnected like this, it suddenly becomes easier to get your holding midfielder on the ball, something England couldn't do in these central areas a lot. And all of a sudden you've got your best passing player, you've got 3 or 4 players here in the half space areas, and suddenly you're now able to break through the first line of pressure. In contrast, England did the opposite. We saw examples where Sturridge was trying to play wide too often, not exploiting the half space, not moving the opposition, and I felt that Iceland didn't have to work very hard. And you can see you've got players like Cahill, a centre-back, having to try and break through the lines. You've got a second example here where the full-back and winger are almost wide in the same. You've got too many players central, nobody in the half space, making Iceland's midfield or forwards really have to be disconnected. The circulation was obviously quite slow from an English point of view. I felt that they used Walker the left back rose too deep. He should have been far higher, which is something I'll come on to again and show that France pushed their fullbacks on much higher, because the access to break the lines even from this picture you can see it's incredibly difficult. It's hard to get Dyer really on the ball because he's surrounded, and it's hard to penetrate between the lines into Rooney or into Ali, because it's easy to intercept and cut out those passes, and so England naturally got forced out wide where it was much easier for Iceland to defend. So the difference in contrasting styles with France is they operated with more of a double pivot and more of a 4-2-3-1 in the build-up shape. They were looking to pull players from the second line, like here, this is a great example, just there, they're looking to pull one of the second line players into deeper positions and then use that space in behind them. They're looking to overload down the channels in the half space areas. This illustrates the point that I'm looking at in terms of France's strategy. They've got multiple options here in the half space. It's going to disconnect them. They've got nice 2 banks of forward. But Giroud, you're going to see, is going to try and disconnect the back line. He's going to push against it and create space. And then that overload in that area allows for a little bit of penetration between the lines. If you look at Iceland's shape, it's now getting disconnected and incredibly narrow as a... We see another wonderful example here where Iceland are far more stretched. The 2 strikers are disconnected, so they can't prevent central midfielders getting on the ball. The midfield line's getting pushed back, but the utilised 2 players get drawn towards the space that's created. And you can see again how narrow Iceland are. The space between the lines is just starting to increase vertically as well at this point in the game, around half an hour in, and that's why they're picking off passes into these little areas. And I mentioned earlier that England didn't push the fullbacks on. You can see here France have really pushed both fullbacks on. They're using the 2 holding midfielders to create a 4 versus 2 overload, but what they've also got here between the lines is a 5 versus 4 with both fullbacks pushing on and a staggered midfield line at different depths, different attacking lines, and this is what's helping to pull Iceland apart. And you can see it again in this last example. You've got 5 players, you've got numerical superiority in the first line, you've got 5 players between their midfield 4, you've got the 2 holding midfielders stretching them, and you've got staggered lines at different depths. And they're trying to draw players in and utilise that space in behind where any midfield disconnects.